Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Camille from Breast Search, and today I want to talk about the 5 languages of love. I want to talk about Alice Cappelle's video on it, which I mainly agree with and yet really don't agree with. So this video will be about all the nuances I want to put into what she said. Before we dive in, I'd like to start with a little bit of context. I am a human development facilitator, which means that I have a master's degree in humanistic psychology, psychotherapy. And I wanted to dive into Alice Cappelle's point of view because I rarely, if not hardly ever, disagree with her. So it gave me the confidence to write a whole essay about why I disagree and to post it on YouTube somehow for my first video essay. I hope you enjoy it. So where did it all start? Gary Chapman, who was a Baptist church advisor for couples and family, noticed that most people have natural ways to accept love or to want to be loved, and he theorized it with 5 different languages of love, which is acts of service, gift giving, physical touch, quality time, and words of affirmation. In a first example that she gives, she criticizes the fact that the author gives the example of a woman who started praising her man for doing very simplistic things in the household, as taking the trash out or washing the dishes, and he suddenly started to do more in the household. She uses this example twice to highlight that it should be a normal thing for functioning adults to do, and he should not need to be praised in order to do those things, which is a very fair point. I actually entirely agree with her on this one. She also points out that the theory has mainly helped women in order to have them in a long-lasting relationship or marriage, emphasizing that this theory has a very religious context and therefore is only targeted to cisgender straight couples and helps the patriarchy. To my point of view, and this is where I disagree with her, something that actually helps the patriarchy doesn't necessarily have to be bad of nature. Hold on a second. I am not saying that patriarchy is good by any means. What I mean is that there are some things that are meant to help you be in more stable relationships or to have a more stable mental health, like psychology knowledge, that can be used to help patriarchy, even though its base is meant to help. It is then transformed by patriarchy for it to become something inherently bad, toxic, or even abusive. Let me explain it to you with 2 examples that are largely recognized to be good in nature or to be good mental health things to apply, and yet that can be weaponized. We will start with boundaries. So, when we talk about boundaries, we talk about limits that one puts others in order to feel safe and comfortable. The job of the person putting the boundaries on is to enforce or reinforce the boundaries. The job of other people is to respect the boundaries. If someone does not respect it, the job of the person who put on the boundary is to remove themselves from a context where the boundary can be crossed. So let's say you have a boundary that is that a friend should not drunk call you at 3 in the morning because beauty sleep is very important to you. And you have a friend who happens to call you at 3 in the morning because they're drunk. So one way to reinforce your boundary is to communicate it. So you gently say, I would really appreciate if you'd stop calling me at 3 in the morning because my beauty sleep is important. And the person has 2 options. Either he respects it and he's a boundary respecter and you're gonna have a great friendship, congratulations, or he doesn't. Now let's imagine that he drunk calls you again 1 week later, but you've already told them once, so you cannot expect them to actually listen to you. So your job as a boundary person is to move yourself from the narrative where the boundary can be crossed. In that example, it could be something like turning your phone off at night, or if you want your phone on in case of emergency, you can enable this person to call you at night, which if you have a smartphone is actually pretty easy. Now, let's say the boundary crosser, that is not really your friend anymore because he's crossing the boundaries, cannot call you because you've enabled them to do so, and they arrive drunk where you live to destroy your beauty sleep. At that moment, you're pretty entitled to say to this person, look, I don't want to be your friend anymore because you don't respect my boundary, which I've over and over stated to you, but I've also made everything possible for you to not cross it. So now the new way to move yourself from the narrative where it can be crossed is to not be friends with this person, which you are entitled to. Now, what you cannot do is weaponize your boundary, which we actually see a lot in a patriarchal society. Often more men against women, but it can be really any gender against any other gender, unfortunately. Weaponizing a boundary looks like using your boundary as a threat. Now imagine with the same example that we had, that instead of going through those steps in order to change the narrative and remove yourself from it, instead you would just threaten the person who is crossing your boundary in order to get what you want. So instead of you moving yourself out of the context, expecting the other one to change, and that's one thing that nobody can actually do in relationship, is to expect them to change. So a way to recognize weaponized boundaries when it comes with a threat. For example, right at the beginning, they drunk call you at 3 a.m. and you tell them, if once again you drunk call me, I will not be your friend again. Right there, what you're doing is threatening to end a relationship, a friendship, because of your boundary. You're not removing yourself out of the context. You're weaponizing your boundary against someone. As I said, obliging someone to change in order to fit into your boundary is actually weaponized boundary. So I'm going to give you another example of that will make it really clear. Let's say you have a cis straight male who wants to be in a relationship with a woman, and he has this boundary for a relationship to work to not let her have male friends. He doesn't want his future partner to have male friends. Now, let's imagine he meets a cute girl, everything is going well. He doesn't tell her that he doesn't want his future girlfriends to have male friends. And then he gets in a relationship with her, expect her to stop being friends with her male friends because it's his girlfriend now. It doesn't make any sense. If the dude wanted his boundary to be respected, he wouldn't date a girl who has male friends in the first place. Or he would state it before getting into the relationship. Of course, you can discover new boundaries as you develop yourself, as you're growing older, or as you get to learn about yourself. This is not a problem. The important part is to state it clearly and reinforce it by your own actions, and not actually expect people to comply to it. And more often than not, in my experience, this is possible in a patriarchal context. Now, this was my first example on how something healthy on paper due to patriarchy can become something unhealthy. Let's dive into the second example, which I hope will be a little less longer. And it is identify and communicate your emotions. That's really healthy, right? It is. I love for people to do that. But emotions can be weaponized too. When we're talking about emotions, when we're expressing our emotions, it is really important to have it clear that they are ours. We should not put the blame on someone else for our emotions. I'm going to give you an example. Let's say I have a date with someone, my partner, and he arrives half an hour late without texting. And when he arrives, I tell him, I'm angry because you arrived late without texting. Now, a correct way, it's not of really big importance. This example is pretty mid. What I could have done, if you're wondering, is understand why it made me angry and communicate it. It can be something cultural. In France, it's really disrespectful because time is important, so you're not respecting my time, you're not respecting me. It could be because I had 100 things to do and I could have done them if I knew you would arrive late. Or it can be, well, I live in Mexico and it is pretty dangerous, so I would be extremely worried if I didn't know he was going to arrive late. I would be worried something happened to him. So I would just communicate that I'm really angry because you didn't text me that you were going to be late, and it made me anxious and worried for if you were safe. So as I said, this is a very simple example. The scale is not that big, the consequences might not be, but emotions can be used in order to justify awful behaviors. Trigger warning here, we are going to talk about abusive behaviors. Someone can use their emotions in order to justify violence. Someone can actually sincerely tell you, you made me so angry that I insulted you, disrespected you, or hit you. It is a very serious topic here. It doesn't have to be anger. I have heard people saying to others, I am so in love with you that I cannot control myself because of jealousy, because of whatever was happening. I am so in love with you that I cannot control myself when I see you talking at the waiter. This is dangerous behavior. This is a way higher scale. And more often than not, in my experience, even though I know that there are some men in some households that are being abused, it is men against women using this and doing this. And yet, this person identifies and communicates his emotions. He's doing it in an abusive way. It can be done in a poor way. Even though if on paper, understanding and communicating emotions is actually pretty healthy. And to finish with this very sensitive and important topic that I want to talk about, this is a behavior that comes from patriarchy. It is more often than not the excuses that are used for household abuse. I think it's important to realize that a theory can always be used in the wrong way, even if it was meant for the good. So here were my two examples on how something healthy can be transformed into something unhealthy under patriarchy. Now, another thing that I would like to nuance in Mrs. Cappelle's criticism is when she says it is important to take into consideration the very conservative roots of this theory before applying it. And I kind of agree, but don't at the same time. I think that's amazing that you can self-analyze, and I love that she questions the goal of the theory and realizes that her love language is actually built up due to the patriarchal system she grew up in. And I think it's pretty fair to say that if so many men crave words of affirmation, it is mainly due to the patriarchal system they grew up in. I think it's actually very important to take into consideration the background and to understand the goal of the theory, but it's not reason enough to discredit it due to it. For example, I studied my master's degree in a Jesuit university, which is one of the best of the country in Guadalajara, Mexico, and yet I have studied authors that used to be priests. It was a very small percentage of the authors that I've studied, but sometimes they would see the world through the religious lens, and it was really important to take that into consideration. We were talking about topics like colonization. It would be the very religious point of view on colonization. It didn't discredit their theories on psychology, though. The Jesuit education system has always supported the highest possible level of knowledge, even if it's religious. And at the beginning, as a French person, I could not understand the concept, because in the culture I grew up in, most people are atheists, and if anything would come from religion, it would be either bad, at least, and worth then, more or less. When in Mexico, most universities, good universities, are private, which not everyone can have the privilege of free good university in its country, but it's also religious. So you cannot discredit someone's diploma because they come from a religious university. In the case of the 5 languages of love, the reason why its background is important, it's not because it's conservative, but it's because it's not scientifically proven. There is no scientific research that proves this theory, nor psychological. And then you might ask me, then Camille, why are you taking so much time nuancing what she is saying about this theory? And that's a fair question. Before I answer this question, I'd like to kind of summarize this part, saying that taking into consideration the context of a theory is not a reason enough to discredit its worthiness. And the fact that, for example, in psychoanalysis, as she mentions in her video, reclaims and reappropriates some psychoanalysis theory for the LGBTQI plus community is a proof of that. Because a theory is not only its creator or its context. In her video, Alice Cappelle quotes Ashley Fetters, saying, "Expressions of affection can vary in significance according to context. In some situations, an act of service or a word of affirmation will be especially meaningful to people, even if they don't believe their love language to be either of those things. For example, and gifts folks can encounter moments in which a well-intentioned gesture feels inadequate." To me, that's kind of common sense. We are human beings. Of course, it's impossible to just reduce us to 5 different languages of love. We are creative. We have 1,000 different ways to love. It's like emotions. There are hundreds of thousands of emotions and little nuances that exist within us. And yet, when I teach about emotions, I talk about the 5 basic emotions: anger, sadness, fear, joy, and affection. Even only those 5 different emotions can be different or differently important or differently accepted depending on your context and culture. I'm going to talk here to give you an example about the 2 cultures and countries that I know best, which are France, because I'm from France, and Mexico, because it's been 4 years I live here now. And in both countries, emotions are treated differently, especially for women. In France, if a woman shows her sadness, she's allowed to be sad, but she cannot be outwardly sad in public. Or anger, they consider her as just emotional or a lunatic, and they discredit her for this. When in Mexico, being quote-unquote emotional is sometimes more accepted. Sadness is actually one of the most accepted emotions in women in Mexico. To me, it's a bit like the basic theory of colors. You have primary colors, and with those primary colors, the possibilities are infinite. You create all other existing colors based on these. Just like emotions, just like love languages, just like theories of colors. To me, the main point is for people to understand the base of it. To have a first understanding that every people are different, and it can help you grow your empathy for them. You can also get to know yourself better and others. You can respect more yourself and create healthier relationships. To me, a world where people try to discover self-knowledge and self-awareness, put attention on the other's needs, and have an equal discussion, dialogue about it, is a better world. And I think having information on love languages can really help. And of course, what you naturally preferred is highly influenced by your context, but everything about you is. For example, Women in France crave acts of service because under this patriarchal system, the French way of patriarchy, they have all of the mental burden of the household. They have absolutely all of the mental charge of the people in her life and of taking care of a home, of taking care of cooking, having to know where things are. Absolutely everything is onto her. And yet, Mexico, for example, once again talking about the countries I know, which is highly, highly influenced by patriarchy too. It's not that it doesn't exist there, it's just that it exists in different ways. The main love language that women want are gift giving. I have some friends who call themselves traditional, who want at least flowers from their partners. They want going to a restaurant, an expensive one, and they want gifts. And that's all they will accept. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's their way of wanting their partners to show them they love them. But the problem here to me is that they sincerely doubt the love their partner has for them if they don't receive those things. And I have spoken to the men in their lives. And of course, some of them are really happy to spoil their princes because, I quote them, they deserve the best. But some others have actually a tough time making them understand that it's not a natural way for them to be themselves and to be there and to show how much their partner means to them. My goal here is absolutely not to compare the two cultures, but to show that patriarchy can actually influence a same theory in a very different way. And once someone understands their context and what has brought them to do the things the way they do them, it is actually a very healthy point where they can decide if they want to continue to do it or if they want new things, what it actually brings to them. For example, let's say a man craves words of affirmation because in his context, he doesn't receive well enough, which is the case of a lot of men. But then if we put him in a context where words of affirmations are not lacking, he might discover it's not his natural love language, or that it depends on the context, or that he's a hugger. No one knows, because he is influenced by his context. And that's a point that I'd like to highlight when I talk about a favorite language or a natural language. Usually people tend to have natural ways to show love. They have a natural way they like to receive love. And it can depend if it's romantic love or friendship love or family love or whatever other kinds of love there can be. For example, I'm going to give you a very personal example. My love language is cooking. I get it from my mom. My mom is an amazing cook and she's always done our favorite things whenever we needed to. This falls under the gift giving, because gift giving is not really only about buying something and offering it to someone. It's the act of actively being thinking about what the other person would like or what would bring them joy. For example, if my partner comes to have dinner at my place after a very hard day, I love to cook him his favorite dinner. And it's very funny because his mom has cooking as a love language too. And the first time I met her, we both baked cookies for each other. And then the second time I met his parents, I had sewed some little bags for them. And then the third time, I actually did my favorite French pastry, which is called la galette des rois. And she knew that I loved the muesli that she does, so she did muesli for me. And we didn't told each other we were going to do something for each other, but we just thought it was a nice gesture and that we would like the other to try or have this thing. Now, another of my love languages, natural love languages that I share, are words of affirmation. I am kind of divinely guided to always send the right words at the right moment, even though I don't know what's going on in somebody's life, I'm going to find the right words, or in some cases the right meme, you know? Funnily enough, I don't really enjoy receiving words of affirmation. What I really love with my friends and my partner is to have quality time and physical touch. That's very interesting because then I don't naturally receive the same things, or I don't naturally value the same things that I receive than the ones that I give. And it can actually be different from relationship to relationship. So if we look at the whole picture here, I'm using 4 of the love languages in my own way in different contexts. And the only one that I don't have and don't actually enjoy that much receiving is acts of service. And my partner, his natural way to show his love is acts of service. And so even though it's not my favorite thing to receive, I don't actually care. Whenever he does it, I know that it's his way to show me that he loves me. When I share those concepts, I give it nuance so that it can offer people a bigger range to work with. They can get curious about themselves, about others, and I think that this is actually the base, this curiosity of what Alice Cappelle was saying was lacking in the 5 languages of love, which is creativity. And I'm not saying that it was necessarily what the book intended to do when it was first released. I'm saying that we are all free to use things in order to discover ourselves. And if this theory of 5 languages helps you to understand yourselves, be a better lover, be a better friend, be a better mom, daughter, father, whatever, that's amazing. Oh God, it's almost done. And now I am going to talk about the last point that Alice Cappelle mentioned that I'd like to deepen. The idea that when something is simplified, a theory, it gives people boxes so that they can identify themselves with the box. They label themselves and they kind of justify their existence. Hello everyone, this is Morning Editing Camille, and while I was doing the edition work, I thought of a new idea that I think I'd like to add. Talking about the fact that a lot of people want to label themselves and are using the simplification of very complex or complicated theories in order to label themselves and find a way to be relevant or to identify themselves to something. I think that instead of criticizing the simplification of the theory or the quote-unquote bad consequence it can have, I think it would be more interesting to wonder why people react like that. In the sense of, what is it in our society that makes it so hard to feel complete within oneself, so much so that we need an exterior validation or an exterior identification in order to feel important? If the topic interests you, I'd love to dive more into it in another video because this would take hours, literally. So yeah, this was editing me, adding another thought to this essay. She mentioned psychoanalysis as an example of this, with concepts that were popularized like daddy issues, mommy issues, Oedipus complex. She also acknowledges that psychoanalysis was reappropriated by authors from the LGBTQI+ community. But ironically, by criticizing those theories, she kind of does exactly what she doesn't like. She does not get into the details of why those concepts that are popularized are dangerous. She does not explain the context except just saying that it's from a patriarchal vision, and she does not get into the details about why she believes it is an actual danger for society, or it's actually a danger in general, to simplify those topics. She mentions Freud and Lacan, who popularized those topics, but Freud and Lacan's were with time criticized and discredited. Their theories does not stand. And it was proven that their theories didn't have any therapeutic success. Those theories are not used anymore. Or if they are, they might have been reappropriated in order to make it more efficient or to dig into why it wasn't working so that we can find new ways to make it work, or it was reappropriated to put it into a new context and how it influenced new parts of our society. So if we're going to look at the history of a theory, I think it would be important to look at the whole picture, just not the root, but how it evolved through time. And I know that I've said that the history of the 5 languages of love is enough. Past shows that you cannot apply it. I've already explained earlier in the video why I use it. Feel free to re-listen to it if it wasn't clear enough. The reason why I don't like the way she portrays it. Hello everyone, this is Morning Editing Camille again. So basically the first time I filmed this part of the video, it wasn't that structured, so I think I can explain better my thoughts right now that I've had a few time to process it. There are 2 reasons I'm not really happy about the way she handles psychoanalysis or psychotherapy in the video. The first one is that at the beginning of the video, she discredits the 5 languages of love because of its conservative roots. And then she kind of discredits the whole psychoanalysis based on 2 authors that were actually way too simplified, but also not accurate at all in terms of psychoanalysis. And she does the same thing where she mentions that the roots are very patriarchal. So to me, the lack of information on psychoanalysis and the mirroring with the 5 languages of love is what discredits it when they're actually very more complex topics. Also, she's talking about psychoanalysis in a critical way, but the thing is that she doesn't take into consideration, once again, all of the history of psychoanalysis and how it evolved with time. And also, to me, the fact that she only mentions psychoanalysis, it can bring anyone that knows absolutely nothing about therapy or psychology think that they cannot trust going to therapy somehow, because she doesn't give enough context and treats the 2 topics as if it was something similar, when the similarity is actually in the reappropriation of the people and not in the theory themselves. I know she's not saying that therapy isn't a good thing or that psychoanalysis is not to be taken seriously or things like that. She talks about the danger of simplifying it, but once again, she simplifies it so much that to me it has, or it can have, this impact. Now, once again, I really love her content. I actually enjoyed this video even if I didn't agree with most of it. And as you can see, it's not that I disagree with the video, it's more that I think it lacked nuance. So here was my 2 cents on the topic. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to subscribe if you want to see more. It's my first try at video essay, but I'll try to do more. I actually enjoyed it, apart from the heat in my apartment while I'm filming this. And like the video and share it to someone you think it would interest. I will see you very soon. I usually also do a lot of meditation video to help you on a day-to-day basis or on very specific topics. And I deep dive into creativity and the process of creativity, which is to me one of the most fascinating part of psychotherapy. So please make sure to come back if you enjoyed it, and I will see you very soon. Bye.